also the Charter County government relationship. There's a lot of activity going on in Frankfurt as we speak. They've had, this is their, I think their 62nd or 63rd day of meeting. There's a bill that's gone through the House. It's in the process of the Senate activity now. Change the classifications of all the cities. We'll see where that winds out. We talked earlier on the class 4 proposition that the bill that passed the Senate today was to allow elections to be held on with a primary election or with a general election, and not. And if you had a special election for that, then those that would call them part would pay for it. So those are the latest development I've picked up, and the others may have heard other comments from the activity. First, I'd like to ask that the elected officials that are here, if they would stand and be recognized, please. With all those that, whether it's county government, city government, school board, and the other elected officials, we're certainly pleased that you're here and active. And thank you very much for being here. Next, I'd like to ask those that are candidates for an elected position that will be shown in the primary election in May, recognizing that the city offices will not be until this fall. I think the filing deadline for city offices will be the 20th of August. And then, as you know, the city commissioners and so forth, is 6 commissioners, and the top 6 on the list and get the votes for the ones that are elected. But get back to the candidates for election for this year. For those who say, I think there's several already stood. We have half a dozen or so here that are already filed. We certainly appreciate your interest and your action being here. The purpose, as we mentioned, is that of the county, except in the county containing a city of the first class, or an urban county government. They vote to merge all units of city and county government into a charter county form of government, or consolidate any agency, subdivision, department, or subdivision providing any service or form unit function for a city or county. The merger or consolidations take place only after complete compliance with the provisions that set forth in KRS 67.830. That's basically where we are today. I'd like to introduce to you the speakers that we have with us tonight. First on beyond Dawn is Dr. Phil Sparks, who's with Chase Law School, works with the urban city government, I believe, area. He met with the leadership group about 10 years ago, along with other representatives from the Attorney General's office, to discuss merger activity at that time. So Professor Sparks is well known in the area. We're pleased to have him with us tonight. Next is Rick Owenstein, who's with the Kentucky Association of Counties. Rick, we're glad to have you with us tonight. And on the right is Skip Watson, an attorney in Roxton, Lexington, and Paris, and according to the Attorney General's office, is very knowledgeable in this whole general area. Ryan Holloran, the Assistant Attorney General, called this morning due to cut back in their travel budgets and so forth. He's not able to come here, and I told him that as close as Orange was to Franklin, that wasn't a very good excuse. But this being 11th year, the general needs to be out and about. So anyway, he's not here. J.D. Cheney, the last one, was invited. He accepted his status to be here. He's the chief attorney with Kentucky League of Cities. I got an email from him Monday that he would not be here, that the mayor requested he not come. So that's the story as far as those are concerned. Judge Keith, have you got anything, Lisa Cooper?
She called me late this afternoon, and she tried to make it, but it was doubtful that she could. So, but she has supplied some written materials about Cheryl Jane.
Okay. So as far as the Attorney General is concerned, they've asked us to keep a record of the questions that may need further clarification, they get the information to us. So that's the activity. Following the presentation of all the speakers, we'll ask any questions you might have to write on your card. Dave Jones and Judy will pick those up and bring them up so Joyce, that Don then can present them to the speakers to clarify. We plan to adjourn no later than 9 o'clock, so if we have other questions, that we'll try to get those back to you as quickly as we can. But at this point, it's certainly a pleasure to introduce to you at this time Phil Spark from the Chase Law School of Northern University.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Just saying, we haven't coordinated our stuff, so we're probably going to have a bit of an overlap here. And shame on the Attorney General's office. I mean, my travel budget is shot too. I'm here on my own dime. They could call.
That's right.
We have 2 questions on the table. My primary area of expertise, so I can see the folks at this way too. My primary expertise is in the area of local government law. I run the Local Government Law Center at Chase. I've been doing this now for more than 30 years. It seemed like it was just yesterday, but I've been at it a long time. And so the problem that we're dealing with, let me steal some of my own notes here. Kentucky has 2 basic forms of local government. We have counties on the one hand, we have cities on the other hand. Right? The history of counties in Kentucky, of course, goes back to pre-statehood days, because Kentucky itself was a county of Virginia before it became a state. And in large measure, we have carried forward that notion of county from pre-statehood days to the current days. So as we conceive of it in Kentucky, the county is a form of local government which is designed primarily to deliver state-level services at less than statewide level. So you think of courts, for example. We have courts in every county. You think schools. We have schools in every county. Counties were designed to try and bring these state-level services down and deliver them on a local government level. In a largely rural state, that works out pretty well. But over the course of 200 years, we've moved from a state which was exclusively rural to a state which in some quarters is highly urbanized and in other quarters remains very rural. Historically then, to deal with those areas that were highly urbanized, we created a second form of local government, the city, to deliver a higher concentration of services to a smaller geographic area. And for a long time, cities grew at a moderate pace and would continue to expand by annexation as the populations of the city grew accordingly. After the Second World War, of course, we have a different phenomenon. We have the process of suburbanization and suburban sprawl and all of that sort of thing. So cities began to spread out over a larger geographic area, at least in terms of population, faster than their geographic boundaries could spring up to respond. And what happened in many communities, like in Jefferson County, you have dozens and dozens of cities to deal with that situation. In Kenton County, not too far from here, you have 19 cities to deal with that problem. So the way we think about local government hasn't really changed all that much in 200 years, but the way our economy has changed, our state has changed, our populations have changed, but the forms of government that we use to address the needs of the people haven't changed all that much. So, back in the 1960s, as Lexington and Fayette began to think about that problem, then we invented another form of local government called the urban county government. And it has worked out pretty well for Lexington and Fayette, but when we tried to extend it to other counties, it didn't work so well because it was designed specifically with Lexington and Fayette in mind. So we invented yet another form of local government called the charter county. It's a derivative of the urban county form. It looks a lot like the urban county form. So, but it tries to adapt the urban county form to counties that have a different distribution of cities and populations than Lexington Fayette did. And now about half a dozen counties have tried to form a charter county without a whole lot of success, and at the risk of leaving somebody out. There was Bowling Green and Warren County tried it that way. Owensboro and Davis County tried it that way. Ashland and Boyd County tried it that way. Frankfort and Franklin County tried it twice and didn't work either time. And most recently, McCracken and Paducah tried to do it that way, all without success. And maybe as we get into this a little, I won't take up too much of your time, but maybe later we'll start to talk about some of the reasons why that might be so. Louisville thought they were special. And so at the time that Lexington and Fayette were thinking about metropolitan government, Louisville and Jefferson County were thinking too, but because Louisville is special, they didn't do it that way. They tried their own attempts in 82 and 83, as I recall, to get metropolitan government done, and couldn't get it done that way either. And the idea stewed in Louisville and Jefferson County for another 30 years before, in the early 2000s, they ultimately succeeded at getting it done. And the folks who write the statutes looked and said, oh, this is good, we'll try and make that option available to all of the other counties in the state too. So we have this creature called a unified local government, which is the other option that might be on the table for you guys in addition to charter counties, if you want to try and combine city and county government in some way. Thus far, only one county has explored that idea of a unified local government, and that's Hardin County. So that's a county with 6 cities in it, or 7, depending on whether you count all the parts of different cities. And there's a group called Hardin County United that's been working on developing the plans, and they were actually successfully a couple of years ago in going to the legislature to get the statutes tweaked a little bit, because they discovered that what worked for Jefferson and Louisville didn't really work all that well in Hardin County, because again, they had a different mix. Not everybody got represented at the table. So the issue here then is, right at the outset, is how do we construct a group to have a discussion about what the best form of local government would be for our area, whether that's Owen County or Kenton County or Davis County or whatever. And the legislature has laid out some rules and tweaked the rules from time to time. But let me give you an example of part of the problem. When Hardin County got the statute changed so that every city in Hardin County gets a seat at the table, they changed the statute so that every city in the county would get a seat at the table. Now, if I take that formula to Kenton County, which has, as I said, 19 cities, if I give every city in Kenton County a seat at the table. And I give the county 55% of the total seats on the commission, which the statute says I must do. The minimum size of commission I can have in Kenton County is 42. But the statute says the cap is 40. So mathematically, it's impossible to do this in Kenton County. And they're going to have to go back and do it all over again too. Right? If I actually do it the way the statute says, the minimum size commission I can have in Kenton County is 58. And I defy you to have a working group of 58 people and not lose your minds. So there are some obstacles that have to be overcome. And what my experience after 30 years of local government is that we need to have the conversation, before we have the conversation, we have to figure out where those obstacles are before we can figure out how to formalize the process so that we can talk about different structures for local governments. When I was down here 2005, perhaps, maybe 2006, almost 8 or 9 years ago now, so you were having that conversation.
How's it work? Y'all have one city here. We're an incorporated city here, I believe. So the county and the city, the county and the majority of the cities can do an ordinance, simple, or to study the question, or citizenry can do a petition. Those are the two options. The reason Spencer County's fell apart, that petition, it can't restrict the Charter Commission's duties. In the Spencer County Taylorsville case, the Court of Appeals in 2012 said, you can't tell the commission they can only look at merger. You've got to let them have the full statutory realm. It could be decide that law enforcement needs to be merged. That's all they come out with. It could be they come out with nothing. And we'll talk about that. So, 2 organization methods. How's it work? I'm not going to go into all the petition requirements. The short part is 5 people inside the county or 5 people outside the county can, and they have to be qualified voters. Did I say inside the county or outside the county? I apologize. 5 people within the city limits or 5 people in unincorporated areas of the county. In the city limits, I'd be talking about this city or Owington, because it's the largest city. They become the petition committee. They start the proceedings. They then go out, basically, and get enough people on the petition. 20%. And it's 20%, like I say, both ways. 20% municipal, 20% outside the incorporated boundaries. Once they do that, they file it with the clerk. If everything's legit, then you can look at the statute and see all the actual requirements. So be it. So you get your petition together, the clerk certifies it, you come back, and you appoint a Charter County Commission. It's done within 60 days of the petition being certified by the clerk. It's a joint appointment. 55% appointed by the county. That's the judge with fiscal court approval. 45% by the cities. For the cities, population ratio. There's 2,000 here, 1,000 there, and 1,000 there. The 2,000 get 50%, the other 2 get 25%. That's the best math I can do. And as Phil said, each class gets 1 rep. The CJE, the county judge, is the chair. It's funded in proportion to population, where they're coming from. There's 5 or 6 components to the plan. What are you going to do? The form, the structure, the functions, the power, what do you want to call it? Who are going to be the officers? What are their powers and duties? How do you amend the comp plan? Is there a contingency in case 2 cities want to do it with the county and 1 doesn't? Do you dissolve your special districts or do you keep your special districts? I'm not sure which ones you all have here. I apologize, you should look. Examples are an ambulance. Sometimes you have ambulance districts. I don't think you all have fire districts, but fire districts, things of that nature. A lot of times you think of them as the taxing districts. If you decide after 5 years, because if you do this, it has to last at least 5 years, that you want to dissolve, what are the procedures? There does have to be a public petition. There will have to be another referendum. What do you do with the debt and the taxes? Does the county get X? Does the city Y get how much? What happens? What's the time frame? You have 4 years to create this plan. So y'all appoint a comprehensive plan committee. They have 4 years to do it. If they can't get it done in 4 years, you would think that ought to be enough. But they can decide to give themselves an extra 6 months. Let's say they get a plan together. It's advertised it's 90 days prior to a regular election. A regular election is your November election. It's not a primary, it's not a special. Regular elections are November elections. You have 3 of those every 4 years. And it has to be the clerk by the second Tuesday in August. Every referendum you see in the statute says second Tuesday in August. Gives them time to prep the issue. So, you do all that. What happens? In pre-2012, when they changed the law, majority just ruled. Post-2012, the majority of the unincorporated areas and the majority of the residents in the city with the largest population, they say yes, it goes through. The other option is the majority of the unincorporated areas and a majority of the residents in cities with a minimum of 50% of the population, of the municipal populations. If your city doesn't approve it, the city's not going to be part of it. If the charter fails, you're stuck for 5 years. By the way, if a city decides they don't want to be a part of it, do the residents still get to vote on the chief executive officer of this new government? The answer is yes. They'd also vote for whichever legislative body member represents that area. Here's the thing, let's say you put it together. Does that mean it starts immediately? No. The folks that are in office at the time, it's voted on. For example, I don't know if you're planning to do it for this year, but let's say you were. You'd have to wait 4 years because those people elected this November have the right to serve out their terms. And then the charter becomes effective upon those new officers coming in. What rights and responsibilities? I think your largest city is a 5th class. You'd have the rights and responsibilities of a 5th class city, and also the rights and responsibilities of a county. Existing contracts, bonds, etc. Your liabilities. Those don't go away, as you can imagine. Those follow to the new government. And nobody's ever passed one of these. Again, it never got to a vote in Spencer and Taylorsville because it got kicked out by the courts. I think there's a question on whether or not a bonding authority, bondholders, may or may not think this is a good idea. I don't see why they would care. Ultimately, they're still going to be covered, but that is an issue. Let's say you do it, what happens? Running a county government or running a charter county government, it's going to be pretty similar to what you're already used to. If you pass an ordinance, 2 readings, your second reading can be suspended by 2/3 of a vote of the membership. The CEO, whoever that is, whether it's a judge or mayor, or you just call it CEO, gets veto authority. Similar publication requirements. Let's talk about your taxing districts. A lot of folks hate their taxing districts. I mean, the auditor did a bill on that last year because of taxing districts. You all can get rid of your taxing districts in this charter. But does that mean that they go away exactly? Yeah, they go away. But under the charter, you can create service districts. And each service district will be a separate taxing district. And these tax rates can be varied based upon the services offering. And so you're still going to have you're not just going to get one tax. If you do this, chances are you're still going to have multiple taxes, but you will have a responsible party, whoever's running the government. And if you want to do a merit system, you could, whether or not that's needed. The government this size would be debatable. So the bottom line is, truthfully, the process itself isn't that hard. It requires legwork. You're going to either have a city and a county, or a majority of the cities in the county. come together and say, we want to do this, and they're willing to pass an ordinance, or you're going to get 5 citizens who are willing to carry the weight, become the charter petition authority, basically, for want of a better term, go and get the 20% that they need within the municipal boundaries, without the municipal boundaries. And then you could have a 4 to 4.5 year wait while your charter commission looks at the issue. And that charter commission is anywhere from 20 to 40 people. And I don't know about you all, but getting 20 to 40 people to agree on something, it takes some time. Bottom line is, after 4.5 years, if nothing happens, nothing happens. Again, Kentucky's never had one he's passed. I don't know that we will. It is doable, and if it's something that you all want, there is a procedure. It's easy to follow. It's just a matter of following through. And with that, yes, sir.
I think the comments we've had so far, we recognize that it's not a one-day proposition by any means. Next on our agenda is Skip Watson. Skip is an attorney in private practice. The Attorney General says he's more knowledgeable than anyone in the state, so we'll test his knowledge here at this time. Skip, good to have you with us.
Howdy, folks. Are there any other lawyers here out in the audience that, any trial lawyer will tell you that they'd like to have the law on their side when they approach something, but they'd much rather have the facts. Now, what Professor Sparks was talking about when he was talking about county and city, legally, everyone who lives in the Commonwealth of Kentucky lives in a county. That is a legal necessity, but it's not a necessity as a matter of fact, because the level of government they provide. Everybody knows why we have 120 counties. So you could get from your house to the county seat, back home before dark on your mule. That's why we have 120 counties. That's an old saw, but it's true. That's why we have 120 counties. I think there are 2 states with more counties, Georgia and Texas. Enough said. Cities aren't legally necessary. You don't have to live in a city. A lot of you folks out there don't live in a city. That's not legally necessary, but it's practically necessary. It's necessary as a matter of fact, because when you pile people in on each other, everybody can't have a septic system. It works fine when you got 40 acres, but when you're on top of your neighbor and your lots are 100 feet wide, it doesn't work very well. So as a matter of fact, you've got to have a way to come together and provide the services that you need because you live in one place. That's why you have cities. City is a municipal corporation. But it's not legally necessary to have a city. I was the first general counsel to the League of Cities. I represented Lexington and Louisville and a number of cities. And I'll stand here and tell you, you don't have to have cities legally. Practically, you do. So, why me? Why should I stand here and talk to you all about this? I've been doing this for almost 40 years now, 75. I got out of the UK in 1969 and spent the next 3 years in the Army. Jump school, Ranger school, off to Germany in the parachute regiment, off to Vietnam, came home, went to law school in 1972. Started as a law clerk with the People's Republic of Lexington in 1975, just before I graduated from law school. And then was lucky enough to be hired as an attorney in Lexington. Well, what was going on then? We've talked about why or how Lexington merged its governments. That's when it was taking place. And that was the practical aspect of putting together a city and a county. It was taking an apple and an orange and squeezing them together and coming up with something that wasn't a pulpy mess. And it wasn't always pretty. It wasn't always pretty. I went from Lexington to Louisville. And Phil's right about trying to merge the governments in Louisville. We started long before 82. When I was there in 78 and 79, we talked about it. And because I was from Lexington, they listened a little. People in Jefferson County, Louisville, don't much listen to anybody who doesn't come from Jefferson County, Louisville. But they listen to little. And they were all hell-bent on making sure every single government in Jefferson County went along with the merged government. And I told them from the beginning, folks, there will always be an Anchorage. Anybody been to Anchorage, Kentucky? There will always be an Anchorage. I don't care what you do with the government. The government of the Commonwealth can go away and there will always be an Anchorage. So you have to look realistically, as a matter of fact, as to what you can do with merging governments. Because it works from a factual standpoint, we'll put it this way, it works easier from a legal standpoint. It's easy to write these laws, tell you how to do it. But when you get down on the ground and you start trying to squeeze that apple and that orange, or something here, you got one orange and three apples. So you got to try and get them all together. So that's a bit of an issue. Why did it work in Lexington? Well, first of all, the statute that you read at the beginning, talking about the efficiency of government. Folks, that's the exact same language in every single statute that's passed in the Commonwealth, in the General Assembly, leading to any kind of a merged government. The language is the same. The emphasis is the same. The results should be the same. You should get efficiency. You should get economy of scale. You should get efficient and economical management of the affairs of local government. Why hadn't it happened? Why has it happened only in Lexington? The Urban County government was the brainchild of a UK political science fellow by the name of Bill Lyons. I was a political science major, but I don't remember having Bill in any of my classes in the late 60s. Mainly because I don't think I studied, he taught government. I studied behavioralism for the most part from a political science perspective. But it was his idea. He came up with it. It's based on the model that was enacted in Indianapolis prior to that. Now what's unique, if anybody knows anything about Indianapolis and Lexington, I don't know, what's the county in Indianapolis, Marion or something? Marion County. In Lexington, in Fayette County, there was a single city. Why did it avoid the balkanization that occurred in Jefferson County, in northern Kentucky? It's because they kept a very tight rein on sewage treatment. Sounds really strange, but you didn't get to develop a subdivision in Lexington in the 60s, in the 50s, if you weren't on the sewer. And the only way you got on the sewer is if you agreed to be annexed. The developers would line up outside of the city commission chambers, and they had to get in the right order to go in and ask to be annexed, because if they got out of order and you skipped one, it didn't work. It had to be continuous. So you take A to get to B to get to C. And there were nights when they'd annex 2 or 3 subdivisions, start the process for annexing 2 or 3 subdivisions in a single night. Everybody knows how Lexington exploded. From the 50,000 people it had in the 50s to the 300,000 or so that are there now. Everybody's, I mean, y'all, everybody goes to watch ball games, go to shop or have supper once in a while. Everybody's familiar with Lexington. It was able to make it as an urban county because it was only one city. And you had one apple and one orange. Now, the other sort of pomegranate out there was the horse farms. Horse farms have a lot of clout in Fayette County. They had a lot more clout in the General Assembly than they do now, but they used to have a lot of clout. What happened in Fayette County was the horse farms were so obstructionist about trying to merge the governments. Finally, everybody looked around and said, there's a bunch of horse farms, but guess what? Those horses don't vote. There are not very many people living out there, and when we put this on the ballot, they're going to have anything to do with it. So they got steamrolled. They just got bypassed in the process. And so that's how they were able to merge the government. They turned loose of the sewers in Jefferson County. They had a metropolitan sewer district. Didn't need a city. I want to be a developer. I go contract with MSD. I'm going to give you so many 1,000 gallons of raw sewage a day, and it's going to cost this, and I'll build the infrastructure to get it to you. And you don't need the city, well, you don't need any city. So that's how it was able to happen there in Lexington. And the same thing happened in Indianapolis. I don't think there might have been another city in Marion County, but if there was, it wasn't the size of Indianapolis. They got steamrolled as well.
Actually, Indianapolis is interesting. Indianapolis tried to do it the way that Lexington and Fayette did, and the people voted against, so the state general assembly imposed it from the top. You don't like it, but we do, so here's the way it's going to be.
on the Urban County Council. Now, what's unique about what we've talked about here? There are 4 statutes that were in place when the Urban County government in Lexington was formed. 4. The reason that they had to put together a statute on Charter County was because there have been so many laws passed by the General Assembly pertaining to the urban county, which was only 1 in Lexington. Just like there's so many laws pertaining to first-class cities, there was only 1 in Louisville, and nobody else wanted anything to do with it. So there was so much baggage that went along with Fayette County that they had to come up with something else because they had tried to do it, it didn't work. You looked at all these hundreds of statutes that you didn't need. So now we're back to the basic bones of what you're able to do with a charter county government or a unified government, or even you could go back and do an urban county government, but I don't see anybody doing that. What this does is put the decision on the form, the structure of the government in the hands of the people, if you live there. Doesn't put the powers of that government. You don't get to determine what powers you got. That still has to come from the Constitution and the General Assembly. They must make laws of general nature pertaining to government, local government. So they're all the same. The powers are going to be the same. How you structure them is up to you. And that's where we get back to facts. That's when we get back to facts. What is in Owen County that needs better management? That lends itself to some kind of economy of scale. If it's police, fine. If it's fire, fine. If it's general government, fine. If it's water and sewer, great. But it's going to be what you determine is required to be merged. You may come to the conclusion, as Rick pointed out, hell, there's nothing to do here. We can't make it fit. We can't make it fit. Or things aren't as bad as we thought when we first started looking at them. Let's just leave them the way they are. What this does is allows you to structure your government in the way that you find best. Rick's already talked about what happens, how you get there, what the procedures are. We'll talk a little bit about the powers. The powers that are granted are the same powers that were granted to the Urban County government when it started. The same language is in there, a la the LFUCG. Powers of a county, at the time they were much more limited than they are now. 1972, much more limited than they are now. Rick will tell you, county power, I mean, there's a laundry list of powers. Cities have home rule. They got around that in 1980. You can do everything that's not unconstitutional if you think it's in your best interest. That's basically what you got, with a few exceptions. Ordinance powers are the same way. They're based on home rule. If you think you need an ordinance on something, you enact it, you enforce it. Same exact language is in the ordinance powers. And that is Urban County Government Charter language. Let me give you a little aside. How the Home Rule Bill for Kentucky passed in 1980. I was general counsel for the League, at that time, the Kentucky Municipal League. We had a big package of municipal legislation we were trying to get through the General Assembly. I think there were a total of 7 bills. There might have been 15 total, but there were 7 that were printed. 7 bills formed the core of the municipal package. It had been studied for 15 years. How are we going to make city government work efficiently? The Home Rule Bill is the key, is the linchpin, the keystone of the entire statutory scheme. If you don't have home rule, the rest of the stuff is useless. Well, it was in trouble. The bill was in trouble, and nobody could tell why it was in trouble. We couldn't figure it out. John Margaret, I think, was governor at the time. I think he was governor. Kennedy Brown. And for some reason, it wasn't going anywhere. Now, anybody who knows anything about the General Assembly knows the biggest stick is carried by the Farm Bureau. The League of Cities, man, they don't have any stick at all. We used to get the jabbers beat out of us every time we went over there to lots. The Farm Bureau used to just, about our head and shoulders, just hit us all the time. We couldn't understand why our cornerstone bill that had been studied for 50 years was going nowhere. We didn't have anything to do. It was behind us. So the governor told a bunch of people, Big Rivers, by anybody else that was in utilities. Had no idea that was the problem, but we fixed it. I can't think of a single difference between a fifth and a fourth, with that exception, that you can declare the economic hardship, get liquor by the drink in restaurants that sell a certain amount of food. And I could be wrong about it. It could be still available in fifth-class city. Do y'all have that now? Does anybody? Do you have a restaurant here? Now that's without going to a vote. You can always do a wet dry election. Well, I say always, but I recognize the practicalities of getting on the ballot, but the problems of getting on the ballot in a wet dry election. But that can be done without a wet dry election in fourth-class cities. I'm not sure about fifth. Anybody else know? Just in general? Well, you don't have to vote for the exemption that I was just talking about. That's done by the city legislative body.
You have the decision, the representatives, and then pass it through the
Oh, you mean to get to be a fourth-class city?
fourth-class city, but you can't sell, have an even alcohol vote in a fifth-class city.
Okay.
It has to be a fourth-class.
And what's going to happen now is the statute's going to be changed to read not fourth-class city, but a city of 3,000 or larger,
Right.
right?
Right now, it says 3,000 ought to be a fourth-class city, but for hardship, it has on there where there are 39 cities that are not, don't have 3,000 to get a fourth-class city.
That's right. And while those existing cities will be grandfathered in, so there will be no similar exemption going forward. There's no way to have the power to do that without the requisite population.
That bill is gonna pass this week. There's no issue, that bill, it went through the House easy. I talked with one of the members of Senate leadership today. That bill is gonna get through this week, and 3,000 will be your magic number. Representative, did you?
Yeah, just want to give a quick update. Sailed through the House last week. Can everyone hear me? It's passed through the House last week. It's in the possession of the Senate. And Rick, you're exactly right. Talked with members of leadership as early this morning. We've already had 2 readings. You have to have 3 readings to be enacted upon. And I think very optimistic that bill, House Bill 331, will become law this session. Unless, barring a train wreck of some sort, which during the last week of session can always happen.
Okay, the first question that came in is merger of city-county government, who controls the police department?
It's gonna be left to the discretion of that body and the plan that it comes up with. All the services in there, you can merge whatever services you want. If they merge, here's the thing, if you merge the city and the county together, there's one city, there's one government, period. This commission can come out, they don't wanna merge the city and counties, but they may decide they wanna merge the police department. They could say it goes under the sheriff, they could say it goes under city police. And the truth is, with something like that, you don't need these statutes. You could do that today with an interlocal cooperation agreement. Woodford County and Versailles did it, and then Midway joined in 10 years ago. And there's still a sheriff's department in Woodford County. Their primary function is tax collection, though they do law enforcement also. Then the Versailles Police Department does countywide patrolling. So ultimately, a lot of your questions are going to come down to, what does this 20 to 40 person commission think ought to happen?
Or rather, what do you think ought to happen before you let the 20, 40 people go to work on that question? That's why I say you need the conversation before you have the conversation.
But understand, once you create a body, they're a runaway, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it comes out bad, they're a runaway train if that's what they want to be. That's why, if you do this, you need to appoint the people level-headed that aren't going to get excited Because let's be honest, what y'all have here for the most part probably works. I'm sure the biggest issue you have is economic. Well, I got news for you. I go from one side of the state to the other. I worked this weekend for a magistrate's conference. Everybody's broke. It's never going to be like it was when I came in 98. Everybody's broke. It may be that this one government could be more cost effective. Only way you're going to know is to find out, is to do it.
At least the revenue.
The only comment I'll make is that who runs the police department is a matter of the structure of your government. You make the decision on the structure of the government. There's a case that was decided that validated the vote and allowed Lexington to merge. And it was a real tricky, legally, we were all fumbling around. We had no idea what they were going to do. And they wrote a great decision. It's one of the best decisions I think the Kentucky then Board of Appeals ever came out with, was that decision, Pinchback against Calvin. Yeah, Pinchback Calvin. Maybe there were two cases that were decided. And it really explains this point about structures and powers. While the commission might think it's dealing with powers, all it's doing is allocate. They come down from on high, get a big funnel, they get down here, and then you start parceling them out. And that's the structure of the government. You all decide how you want to do it.
One further point. That if I look at the mergers that have occurred all across the country, so if there's one thing that's virtually certain to guarantee the failure of anything that's put on the table, is that the local sheriff isn't on board with the plan. It's the one guy who seems to be able to stop it dead in its tracks everywhere in the country, is the local sheriff. So if the sheriff's okay with, the city policing and being a tax collector, that's what we've got in Campbell County where I live, then it's gonna go. If he's gonna fight it tooth and nail, the prospects for success are starting to go downhill. So he needs to be on board. There are people who can do it too, but that's the best indicators, where's the sheriff?
Okay, in the event of city-county merger, what would be a benefit and the downside for grants and other state and federal monies? And the people in the back are saying they can't hear, so if you don't mind to pass the mic down, please.
Actually, it's not going to affect you from that standpoint. There's a statute in here, I can't tell you the exact number, but basically what it talks about is that you'll be eligible for both the city and the county. You're going to designate part of it that's more municipal, like Owenton, and parts of it are more rural, like most of the rest of Owen County, and you'll be eligible for both. And that's really what it comes down to, is you'll be eligible for both.
The only thing I can think of is it may spread out LMI, low and moderate income, to allow a more prosperous part of the county to utilize funds that otherwise would have been limited to an LMI area, which may not be applicable in one county, either because you're all in or you're all out, don't know. But that's the only thing I can think of. I can't think of any other specific grants that are city, county. I don't know about libraries. I don't think there's any impact on libraries based on city or county.
Okay, the next, I'm gonna combine a few cards together because I think it all combines together. One card says the city currently pays for all the street lights in the city, and the city also pays donations for Friends of Animals and all the expenses for the city fire departments, meaning the trucks, equipment, and training fees. What happens to all of those expenses? And also what happens to the 1% payroll tax that the city currently gets from those that are payrolled working in the city?
of that, again, depends on the structure that you devise when the process is over. You, as Richard alluded to earlier, you could create service districts within the county so that some areas get more intense level of services and bear a portion of the cost for that. There are a number of, as I recall, there are a number of complicated rules about how to apportion the occupational taxes, and I don't remember the details. You're small enough that, Rich tells me you're small enough that those rules wouldn't apply here, so you're not going to be affected when it comes to the 1% stuff.
Well, the city has 1% payroll tax,
The mayor mentioned the city has a 1% occupational. The mayor does, and the city also has an insurance premium. So the bottom line is, those taxes aren't going away because you're still going to need funding. The question is, really in my mind, the question is, will your expenses go down rather than will your revenues go up? Your revenues could go up tomorrow because the city could go to 1.5%. The county could pass a 1%. All that could happen today, and probably all that could happen a year from now if this were to happen. I do want to say one thing, and I see the police officer back there, and I may have misspoke earlier, and it was not just about where would the police go. I think it's a bigger question of when you choose your officers, who do you choose? And when Louisville passed their merger a few years back, they went on to say that none of the officers, well, the county judge, gets 0. They still pass city legislative body and county legislative. I don't know if the city. They still pass the county legislative body because it's constitutional. But they also get 0. I don't believe there's anything in this statutory scheme here, and I don't mean that scheme in a bad way, that says the judge doesn't get anything. And there's currently a statute on the books that says the judge gets X dollars a year, a sheriff gets X dollars a year, and I don't think you all will have the ability to make those X dollars go away. So if you decide you wanted to merge your police force, you could have a sheriff and a police chief, but you still want to pay your sheriff, which is an expense. So more than likely, you're going to have a sheriff and not a police chief. More than likely, you're going to continue to have a county judge and not a mayor, because you want to pay that county judge anyway, unless the legislature amends the statute. The clerk doesn't matter from this standpoint. You've got to have a county clerk regardless, because you've got to be able to pay your taxes and pay your bills. Same thing with the jailer, same thing with the county attorney. But those two positions are probably still going to be there, sheriff and judge, because you're going to have to pay them, because I don't recall, unless you two do, anything in the this statutory scheme that takes that salary away.
Under the commission type though, the charter form of government, which I have worked under before and seen, who ultimately makes the decision of who is the leader of the law enforcement? Will be the appointed chief of police, or will it be the sheriff that's elected by the people? Who will be the leader, the decision maker of the gentleman as whole, of the whole public?
Let me try to add, I'll tell you what happened in Lexington, and I'll cover a couple of areas. One, we had a city of Lexington Police Department, and we had a county police department, in addition to the sheriff. They did this throughout the merged government in Lexington. If they picked, and they took the people that were there, because they were most familiar with everything that was going on. I mean, you weren't going to hire a parks director from some other town. You took your county parks director and your city parks director and you worked it out. The way they did it in Lexington was, if the county, if you chose the head of the county parks department to run your merged parks department, then the deputy was the city parks department person. The same thing happened at the police department. If you got the city chief of police, then his deputy, they're all men then, folks, I'm not being sexist. His deputy was the county chief of police. and it went down the ranks like that. You took one from column A, one from column B, and you kind of merged them. Did that work? Sometimes. Sometimes it didn't work at all.
Right.
Sometimes people left immediately. Sometimes people retired very quickly, but that's how it was done. In terms of the taxing districts, let me tell you how it went in Lexington as well. When I started there, we had 4 taxing districts. Well, we had a general services taxing district, the whole county. Everybody paid the base county tax, the same tax that you were paying at the same rate you were paying Fayette County. And everybody pays that whether you live in the city or don't. Right? Everybody pays that. Then on top of that, there were separate levies for, now that I think about it, sewer at the time was not done on a per water basis, it was done on an ad valorem basis. The EPA made us do away with that almost immediately. Street lights, streets and roads, street maintenance, street cleaning, and the last one was, let me think, sewer, street lights, streets, seems like there was one more. And on top of that was the library. The library ran itself. You know, you have a library district, you're not going to change that. You're not going to merge those guys, just leave them out there, they do a good job. Same with your conservation districts. You can look at them, but, you know, maybe give them a place at City Hall or wherever your merged government's going to be. But you layer these taxes on the place that is being provided the service. So if there are no street lights in the county, then the folks in the county don't pay a tax for street lights. It's as simple as that. Now, as street lights progress, as they're needed on the rural streets, then that tax gets imposed as the street lights march down. And you may get to the point, if everything gets really well again and we're all flush with cash, where the county just pays for all of them, don't worry about where they are, and worry about who pays the tax on it or not. I don't know if that helps, but that's how we layered. Oh, I know the last one was garbage collection. Thank you. If you got garbage collection, then you paid a separate levy. And there were 4, you got a tax bill, if you were in the full services district, like I was, that had 5 separate tax rates on it for each of those urban services that you received, in addition to the conservation district, the library, whatever else is there. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Next question I have, what happens to city councils if there's just one government? For instance, Monterey, Grass, Owens, and that didn't put it on, but Sparta is already also incorporated in half in Owen County, half in Gallatin County. So, Bill, do you want to tackle that?
What happens to the city councils? Well, for those cities who are participating cities, there is no city council anymore. There's one government for the whole county. The fiscal court goes away, the city councils go away, and one government designed by the commission takes the place of those. For those cities that exempt themselves from the process, they remain incorporated and they keep their city governments.
Did you mention that Sparta's in both? You know, in Sparta, that might be a different situation. The city may not go away completely if they were merged. I don't know. The statutes don't address the issue. And the part that's not in Owen County, in my mind, would probably continue to exist. But who the officials are, you may end up with no mayor, depending on where the mayor currently lives. I mean, you're going to have some vacancies at the least, and your boundaries will most assuredly have to change. That was never contemplated by the legislature. And frankly, I don't blame them. We only have a few cities that are in multiple counties. Outside of Corbin, I don't know of any others.
I can think of. Is it actually? Is that something in Boone County? I don't think there's any Jefferson. In Fayette County, there's a 15-member urban county council. 3 of the members are elected at large. They don't run by district. They're just like they used to be 3 county commissioners. 3 are elected at large. The other 12 run from very well-defined districts. So that's how you get representational government. And if you were writing a plan, a charter, I think, to avoid voting problems, don't know about the Voting Rights Act, whether it would have any applicability here or not. If you've got minorities, I doubt it. But you would have to give some thought to structuring the government so that somebody had a chance to run from and represent what used to be a city, what used to be one of those three cities. The same with your unincorporated urban places. I looked at your map, you got a number of those. I don't know which the ones are incorporated outside of Owenston and Monterey. It looks like there's 3 or 4 others. Gratz is the other city. The others are unincorporated urban places. I assume they're on the map. So you got to give some thought to how those people are represented. And again, that's if it turns out that you draw a map that doesn't afford what used to be or what will soon not be Owenston if it goes forward, folks, it ain't going to pass in Owenston. Simple as that.
You mentioned something about the city opt-out, can a city opt-out and not become a part of the merged government?
By a vote of the people, yes.
By all the people on it.
Yes. That's the only way out, yeah.
Did y'all hear the question? The mayor asked whether or not a city could opt out. And the way the statutes are set up is if 50% of the voters in Owenston say no, they're not in.
One of the important things about that is some of the statutory things we have on supermajorities and voting require a majority of a given percentage of the registered voters. That's not the case in the statute. It's based on the turnout. So you can end up with a merged government or a unified government when a majority of the people didn't vote for it, if they didn't vote. Does that make sense? You know, as opposed to an annexation vote, for instance, to defeat an annexation, you've got to get a given percentage, I think it's 55% of the registered voters to vote against it. So there's a supermajority there. In this case, not. In this case, it's simple majorities. There's one interesting thing. If the fiscal court in 2 of your cities decide, or 1 of your cities decides, the biggest city decides, we're going to form this commission, and you put the commission together, the other 2 cities get representation on that commission, whether they voted an ordinance, whether they passed an ordinance to participate in the charter or not, they get a representation. So they're not cut out of the charter writing, even though they decided not to go along with saying, let's take a look at it. Does that make sense?
Under the unified county form of government, it was always possible to do this with the county and one city to the exclusion of the other cities. Until 2 years ago, it was possible, using the charter county form, to coerce the participation of cities who did not want in. That got changed 2 years ago. The provisions that were inserted to allow opt-out from charter counties for cities were, in my estimation, not fully thought through. So that's another one of those holes, like what do you do with the city that's in 2 counties, that right now is simply not addressed by statute.
Skip, you mentioned in a comment a couple of questions ago about the combination of the city street lights and sewer. There were 4 things. These 2 questions are, what happens to all the responsibility of blacktopping and sidewalks that were in the city area?
You'll still have access to the same county road funds that you do now. And you'll still have access to the municipal road aid dollars that you do that are based on gasoline taxes. How you decide to spend that money is up to the government. Is up to how it's structured. But you'll still have the same right to the same amount of money from both of those funds. I don't think there's any difference. You'll still have the same ability to assess for public improvements. If you decide you need to build a new street or rehab a street, you can go back city, I don't know if it's available at the county. And you could assess the people who live along that street, the cost of rebuilding that street. Same with sewers, the same with any public utility you need. So all of those tools are still in the toolbox. None of that's going to change. I mentioned sewers at first in Lexington. Everybody, I'm sure, pays sewer bills based on their water usage. Is there anybody who doesn't? Unless you pay maybe a flat amount. Well, it's a percentage of your water bill, but then again, that comes down to how much water you use. Now, there may be an exception if somebody has a greenhouse. You know, the water's not going in the sewer. 80% of the water's going to start tobacco plants or to grow flowers or to grow sod or do something else, even though that city is treated water. And most cities make an accommodation for that. You know, they figure out how much is going in the sewer and how much isn't. And you pay accordingly. But those are fee-based as opposed to tax-based. And the only way the taxes work is on the ad valorem, on the value of your property. That shouldn't change. Shouldn't change.
And one thing I wanted to say, and I think it's based off the question, you know, the kick's going to come, you're going to have the same revenue available. You know, I've been doing this, like I said, for 16 years now. And in a city like this, a county like this, where y'all get along, it's not usually a problem. Counties will help out the city with some road work. The cities may help out the counties with road work. We see that all the time. There's a lot of interlocal agreements just for that purpose on the DOG's website. If this occurred and you have a merged government, assuming you merge everything, the one benefit you have, or not the one, but a benefit you have is that legislative body and that executive authority will be answerable to all of you. So that in theory, that municipal road aid and that county road aid will be used under one plan instead of under two. And in theory, then your money should or could be spent more wisely. In a county and city like this right now, where y'all get along, that's not an issue. But there's other counties and cities right now where the mayor, the judge, the city council, the fiscal court do not get along, and where they've been working well together, like with the joint tourism board, for example, they're splitting those things up. It only takes one party to split it up. So all of a sudden, you're taking well-used money to less well-used money. And that's the one benefit, the biggest benefit I see from one government versus two.
Okay, next question I have is just a little curious. Why was J.D. Cheney, the Kentucky League of Cities, asked not to be here at our meeting? And all I can answer on that, I have an email from him that I received Monday morning. Please feel free to call me on my mobile phone. It gives a number. I got a call from Mayor West, who is a member of the KLC, which is Kentucky League of Cities, asked that we not participate in the forum we was scheduled. I am recommending that if you're looking for someone to provide insight, merged government, you contact Rick Goldstein of the Kentucky Association of Counties, which we did, and he's here. We know these statutes and rules as well as we do. I apologize for late notice, as I did not expect the city would object to our involvement, and I did look forward to participating with you. Sincerely, I'd like to be of further help.
With Owen County being a rural community, do you see a city-county government merger affecting the farmers' ability to be able to still do what they need to be effective on their farms?
I think that a well-designed charter county should have no effect on the way that farms or other industries in the county operate. It's true that the genesis for charter counties and unified counties come from counties like Fayette and Jefferson, which are metropolitan forms of government. But as Skip has already said, it's how you distribute those powers and how you exercise those powers that's important. And that should necessarily affect any particular industry within the county.
Venture County is approximately the same size as you all. The city of Taylorsville is about the same size as Owensboro, or at least it was 5-6 years ago. They get a lot of Jefferson County migration out. The county was for it, and there wasn't any uprising, as I recall, from the rural residents, from the farmers. So I don't see this having any impact on the farmer one way or the other.
The city has zoning ordinances and the county don't, but zoning ordinances go away.
No, zoning ordinances wouldn't, is everybody have a question? The city has zoning, the county doesn't? That's defined by the area that's covered by your comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive zoning plan, not your comprehensive plan that we've been talking about here today that is for the structure of your government. No, it wouldn't. Now, does that mean they wouldn't look at it? I don't know. That's up to y'all. You could do that now. You could have zoning in your county now. I think that's one of the things that the Chamber of Commerce looks at when they do certified cities as to whether you got any zoning in place. I don't know how important it is or isn't in this jurisdiction. If the county doesn't want it, then you couldn't. You still have well, you don't have a joint planning unit at that point. I don't know how they address that. We'd have to think about what happens to, because your planning unit, the only way you have an independent planning unit is if you have first asked all of the other governments, do you want a joint unit? And if everybody turns you down, then whoever's left, or the 2 or 3 that are left, can form their own planning unit. But generally, that somebody asked Owen County when they started it, do you want in? And they said no. That's the only way you don't have a joint unit. So I don't know what happens at that point. I don't think it would change the scope of the zoning statute or the zoning ordinance that's in place in terms of actual zoning places. Just let me give you, for instance, Pentland County, which isn't far from here, and it's probably a lot like this jurisdiction. It had zoning before the city of Fountain, so they were looking to be a certified area from a business standpoint prior to the city adopting. So sometimes it works the other way.
I can tell you this, it's me guessing, but I've got a pretty good feel, I think. If this commission, which I don't think they have the authority to do it anyway, decide that they were going to put countywide zoning, I can just about assure you would fail. But the truth of the matter is, I think the P&Z area would stay where it currently is. The unified or the consolidated legislative body could try to make it larger, but y'all vote it out. So
Let's be clear, the commission, the Charter County Commission has no power to affect the zoning ordinances or any other ordinance. Right? The ordinances that are in place now in the cities and the county will continue into the new Charter County government. And the new Charter County legislative body, whatever that is, then will amend them, repeal them, expand them, whatever, because the new county will have ordinance power of its own, but the pre-existing ordinances continue until the new county government replaces them.
Does the county residents inherit the current ordinances of the city along with this, so as if we had a yard sale or something, would we be under the current ordinances of the city? Will we inherit that? Will it be unified across the board?
The short answer is yes.
Let's hold the question there until we get through those that have been written down.
Okay, another question that came in is, if we move with Charter County government, can you give us examples of how the debts are grouped together and how possibly other counties have separated those debts or combined those debts, or, and what about services? Were there any examples of services that you could give, combining, not combining? And I think you've addressed that a couple of times, with that you could do fire, you could do police. But this question came about the money owed, how are the debts handled?
Here's the thing, the debts don't go away because you merged. This new consolidated body, this new legislative government would have the debts. It's not gonna change. Right now, if you owe, between the two counties, if you owe 50,000 and 50,000, you'd still owe 50,000 and 50,000, just be one debt holder at 100,000. Or debt, wouldn't pay at 100,000. Bottom line is, y'all don't have much debt. And I pulled the county and debt report, and I think you all bought a vehicle last year. That's all you all owe is $50,000, maybe $40,000. And they could have borrowed somewhere around 15, 16 million. I think is the 2% debt capacity. Mayor, I had the DOG pull your alls. Y'all haven't borrowed money, and I don't think I was a lawyer yet the last time y'all borrowed money, so I apologize. So bottom line is, y'all don't have any debt to speak of. If I was in your all's shape, I'd be spending a whole lot more money at home, I can tell you that.
In contrast, out in Paducah and McCracken, said Paducah had got itself into quite a hole. It was running at operating deficits in the city, and it had quite a city debt load. And the single biggest sticking point for the folks out in the county was they saw merger as a bailout of the city. It's having the city's debt spread over the whole of the county. That's, that was a real serious issue, an obstacle to the success of what they were trying to do out there.
That also occurred in Scott and Georgetown. I went to that one last year, the year before. The biggest issue was Scott County has zero debt, and because of Toyota and all the people moved into Georgetown and the annexations, Georgetown has tremendous debt. And that ultimately is why the county thought, this would be a terrible, terrible idea. We've been, anyway, y'all can take the rest of that.
I think the majority of these other questions have all been answered in some form or format. The last one that I see that was a little bit different is, from your experiences in merging or consolidating city and county law enforcement, what about the quality of service out to the county residents? Do you see effects in police enforcement?
The only one I'm going to talk to you about really is Woodford County. Well, I'll mention a couple others. Woodford County, near as I can tell, I live in Lexington, so I'm in Woodford County quite a bit because I work in Franklin. My boss, Denny Nunley, our executive director, was sheriff back in Woodford County, back when sheriffs were no longer allowed to run for re-election because the sheriff ran the county. Didn't know that till I went to work for him. So he was a sheriff. He was a county judge, a state senator for that matter as well. I know the current sheriff. I know the former sheriff. The former sheriff is now county judge. He didn't like the idea of losing his powers. And he didn't lose his powers, he just lost a big part of his budget. But the bottom line is, I talked to my friends that live in Woodford. I talked to my boss. They're not seeing any difference. People in Midway are getting about the same level of protection they had before. The people in Woodford County are getting about the same level of protection before. You have to realize, and I'm going to compare y'all to McCreary County. Well, maybe not McCreary, but a couple of the counties down there in the south. Smaller counties, 10,000, 12,000 population counties. Those counties probably only have 6, 7 deputies to start with. The city might have 2 or 3 police officers, because that's all they can afford. Y'all afford. The bottom line is, you may be able to better utilize those peace officers, the deputies and police officers. But at least in Woodford County, the only county that I know that's merged law enforcement, they've not seen a real issue with it. The protection's still there. So, And Lord knows, those horse farm owners would raise all sorts of heck if that protection wasn't there.
At the time they merged the Urban County government, or set up the Urban County government in Lexington, the level of professionalism of local police officers was not that high. This was about the time we were putting into place the CLEF program. If anybody's familiar with how all that got started. CLEF grew out of the riots that occurred in Watts in 1968 in Los Angeles. And the fact that everybody realized we have a bunch of police officers who were required to do something they were never trained for. When they started looking at the level of training police officers got, they came to the conclusion, we didn't, they're out there doing a bunch of things they aren't trained for. So that's where all of that professionalism came from. Kentucky has one of the best sources of funding. You might not like it, but you pay a surcharge on your property insurance to fund CLEF. Well, who better to bear the expense? Who looks after your property? The police officers and the firefighters, and they're the ones who are benefiting from that tax. And very little is scraped off. There's not much administration that goes into those funds or comes out of those funds. So that's one of the success stories for the Commonwealth, is the level of training that we have for our police and firefighters now as a result of those taxes. But again, that's coming from the state level. It was a mixed bag. In Falmouth, I think there are 7 or 8 police officers. They end up policing a lot of the county at night because they're the only full-time department. You have in effect the mutual aid agreement. Well, to me, the mutual aid means we back up the county in the county, and they back up the county, they back up the city in the city. What it actually means is when we're on duty, we cover the county. I don't know if that works in your county or not, but that's pretty much how it is. And if you can find an economy of scale there by maybe cutting out some of the administration, you may be able to put some more officers on the street, or the roads, as the case may be. Does that answer your question?
So from a national perspective, I think that there's a consensus that what happens after a merger is that the quality of services like police, fire protection, and emergency medical services generally tends upward rather than downward. That the quality of the service in the best unit of government gets spread across the whole of the remaining government. Nobody wants poor fire protection. Nobody wants poor police protection. Right? So because of the economies of scale that Skip alluded to, what tends to happen is everybody rises up to the level of the best level of protection there was in the pre-existing governments that were there before.
Y'all got volunteer fire departments here? Do you have some?
Yeah.
They have to be part of the process. Do they levy their own taxes, or do they get fees, or what do they do? Form or taxing districts?
Membership fee.
Membership, okay.
The city is not part of the city tax.
Part of the city tax base. That's normal, that's usual.
Woodford County, is it a police run or the sheriff run law enforcement agency?
What county was that?
Woodford County.
Woodford County, is that city-run or county-run police department?
The city runs it for sales. Again, the sheriff still does some, but ultimately it was for sales. And Woodford, that's an interlocal, merged law enforcement under Versailles, still got a sheriff, still through tax collection. And then about a year, maybe 2 years later, Midway came in and merged their police force in as well. Those are the only 2 cities in Woodford.
Midway contract.
Yeah,
70,000 a year.
well, they do and they don't. They did an interlocal agreement, because I had to approve it, because they did have their own small police force. They did an interlocal agreement, basically, to come in.
The final part I have is a question to Mayor West and Judge Keith. And at this point, they're here for informational session as well. So I don't know that it's fair to them to put them on the spot. But if you would like to ask them afterwards, or after they have an opportunity to get back with their city council as well represented, fiscal court as well represented, I'm sure they're all gonna be talking about this as much as we are, but why do you want or not want a merged government? So you all think about that question and how you'd like to respond, and I think